Mike Thomas of the New Orleans Saints took to Twitter yesterday to say if Antonio Brown is really leaving, man, Pittsburgh is about to be funny looking next year. The truth always comes to the light. Pay attention. He opened up everything for the passing game and still got his. That's Michael Thomas, Saints receiver. Ed Bouchette covers the Steelers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's been all over this Antonio Brown situation. Ed joins us now. Ed, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Good morning, Mike. I'm good. A little frog in the throat, but good. Thanks.
Well, there's a little bee in the bonnet for Antonio Brown. We saw that tweet yesterday. I instantly thought that there must be a deal in place to trade him somewhere. Do you know what the Steelers' reaction was to Antonio Brown saying goodbye at a time when there's been no goodbye to be said?
No, Mike, but I think, Art Rooney, their president, said it a while ago. He said he can't envision him being on the team next year. So, to me, this wasn't even news. I think he's gone one way or the other.
But didn't Art Rooney, after that, try to maybe pull it back in a little bit? I mean, my take on it was this, Ed, that Art Rooney initially was putting the for sale sign out there, hoping that multiple teams would spark an auction and they'd get a great offer and they'd do a deal, they'd finalize it March 13 and everything moves forward. I don't think they got the offers they liked, and I think at that point you have to act like you're going to keep the guy to maybe get the offers you want. Do you think that they are entertaining any possibility of trying to keep him around?
I think that I really don't think so, Mike. I'd be surprised if he comes back. I mean, you have that domestic dispute added on to everything else now, and I know some of his teammates have said they want him back, and Art said he would talk to the leadership, but I think this has reached a point of no return.
So how do they properly separate? When do you trade him? There's a $2.5 million payment that comes due the fifth day of the league year. If the offers aren't there, do you just take whatever you can get like they did for Santonio Holmes 8 years ago and move on? Or do you try to play this out to maximize your return?
Well, I don't know if you're going to get anything more after March 17th is when that $2.5 million is due. So you take what the best offer, provided that's not from the Baltimore Ravens or Cleveland Browns or Cincinnati Bengals.
So, and I think it's safe to say, especially since you mentioned the three teams in the division, they're not going to cut him. They're going to trade him somewhere so they don't have to worry about him showing up in the AFC North. But your guess is ultimately they're just going to take the best offer they can get to get him probably out of the conference and then just move on.
Yeah, Mike, even I hate to say it, but even if that's a conditional seventh-round pick for 2020, you have to move on. There's been too much drama over the last 2 years. They didn't make the playoffs last year. They still have a couple good receivers, and they can pick up a third. Look at what New England has done with receivers through the years. You don't need future Hall of Famers necessarily to help you get to a Super Bowl.
Isn't it, though, difficult for the Steelers to accept the fact that they are in a situation where they don't have the control that they usually have over their players? They're one of the organizations that typically what they say goes. We negotiate when we want to negotiate. We don't negotiate when we don't want to negotiate. These are our terms. This is the way we do things. We don't have guaranteed money beyond the first year of a deal. You know, they are very used to setting terms to the players and not having the players tell them how it's going to be. Is it difficult for the Steelers to give Antonio Brown what he wants?
Well, I think it's what they wanted before he came out and said what he wanted, Mike. And yes, and I will tell you, when I was at the Super Bowl all week, people were coming up to me, league people, writers, broadcasters, you name it. They were stunned at what was going on in Pittsburgh over the last year, 2 years, really. And it's that's what they were all saying. It's very un-Steelers-like. But with Bell and Brown gone, I think most of the drama that evolved over the last 2 years will have gone with them.
I had Cam Hayward on set at the Super Bowl. He was the first-round pick in 2011, 1 year after Antonio Brown was a sixth-rounder. And I said, how does this happen where Antonio Brown becomes this diva who is always late, who has things done a different way, and gets validated with 2 long-term contracts. How did the Steelers let it get to this point? Cam didn't have a good answer. Ed, how did the Steelers let a 6th-round pick, a guy who shouldn't have walked through the door thinking he's a big deal, grow into this guy who expects and is allowed to have a separate set of rules?
Death by inches, as the new coach of the Denver Broncos said when he was talking about how you clamp down on this stuff early. You can't keep letting them go, do this, and giving them more rope and more rope. Mike Tomlin said a couple of years ago when someone asked him, Ron Cook of our staff, how he allowed Antonio Brown to keep doing stuff. And most of it was on-field celebrations before the celebration rule was eased and getting penalties like that and throwing fits on the sideline. And Mike Tomlin looked at Ron and said, what do you want me to do? Bench him? So, they've enabled this in some ways.
And, there's been a lot of discussion about Mike Tomlin, his future in Pittsburgh. We had the 50th anniversary of Chuck Noll being hired. There have been 3 coaches in a half-century. That's all well established. I feel like that reality has become such a part of the fabric of the organization that Mike Tomlin, and whoever the coach would be right now, whoever it is, I feel like there isn't the same fear within the Steelers organization of getting fired if you're the head coach as there would be with any other team. Is that an accurate assessment? And should there be that healthy fear for any NFL head coach that, hey, if you don't do your job, if you don't hold your players accountable, if you don't instill discipline, if you don't get results, you're not going to have a job?
Yeah, it actually, Mike, it worked that way with Bill Cowher. He had 2 years left in his contract, and that's when they normally negotiated an extension, and they didn't do one after he won a Super Bowl. And he went into that last season, and he decided he didn't want to sign with them because he felt they didn't negotiate well enough, if that's the way to put it. And Mike is now going into his last 2 years, and he didn't make the playoffs last year. So I would bet we're not going to see a contract extension for him, and then he'll have 1 year left, and who knows what can happen. This is a big year for them and him, I think. And I think you're right. The dynamic may not be there as it was with Chuck. And Chuck didn't make the playoffs 7 of his last 8 years.
Yeah, and there was a stretch for Cowher at one point with 3 years, no playoffs, and the Steelers have prided themselves on that stability. But, when there's a sense that the team underachieves, and at some point, even if you make it to the playoffs or even if you have a winning record, it's not good enough if you're not cashing in on that full potential and delivering championships, especially now that the Patriots have 6 to match the Steelers. Ed, great stuff as always. We'll check out your work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Post-Gazette's website. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, Mike. Thanks for having me on. See you later.
There he is, Ed Bouchette, one of our good friends of the program and fully aware of what's going on in Pittsburgh. And it sure sounds like the Steelers at some point before March 17 are going to take the best deal they can get, even if it is a conditional 7th-round pick in 2020 just to unload Antonio Brown. That's significant.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.